Naho Takemiya is running late for her first day as a sophomore in high school. She finds a strange letter written by herself from 10 years in the future. In class, a new student named Kakeru Naru sits next to her. Naho and Kakeru are invited to walk home with Naho's friends, Hiroto Suwa, Takako Chino, Saku Hajida, and Azusa Murasaka. They all eat buns from Azusa's family bakery, and later, Kakeru hangs out with Naho and her friends. Kakeru is absent from school for 2 weeks, but when he returns, he jokes with Naho that he was just skipping class. Naho's right foot gets injured because her shoes are too small. During a softball tournament, her letter advises her to accept an offer to be a pinch hitter to avoid regret. This decision helps the girls' softball club win the tournament. Afterward, Kakeru treats Naho's blistered foot, and she starts falling in love with him. According to the letter, Naho must keep a close eye on Kakeru because he may not be alive in 10 years. Fast forward, 10 years later, Naho and Suwa are married and have a baby boy named Matsumoto. Kakeru surprisingly doesn't bring lunch to school. Naho sews a button back on Suwa's uniform, and he invites Kakeru to join the boys' soccer club. Naho makes 2 lunches at home. The next day, she's nervous to give Kakeru a lunch during morning class. After school, Kakeru notices her bigger lunch bag, but Naho avoids him. After soccer practice, Naho apologizes to Kakeru for leaving abruptly. Suwa rides his bike home, and Naho walks with Kakeru. He asks about her hobbies, and she learns he was absent for 2 weeks because his mom, who died by suicide on his first day, had a funeral. Naho finally gives Kakeru the lunch, making him happy. She's determined to keep him smiling every day. Her letter reveals Kakeru dies in a supposed future accident. 10 years later, Naho and her friends get ready to visit Kakeru's grave. Suwa tells Naho that Kakeru will officially join the boys' soccer club. Even though her letter says something different, Naho realizes the future can change. After morning soccer practice, Naho and Kakeru deny having crushes on others. During a half day at school, Kakeru gets drinks from the vending machine for Naho and her friends, and Naho picks orange juice. Just like Naho's letter predicts, Ryo Yida, who watches Kakeru during soccer practice, confesses her feelings to him. Naho lends Kakeru a pencil and eraser in class. After class, she finds a note from Kakeru asking if he can date Yuida inside her eraser cover. Naho writes a note saying no and leaves it in Kakeru's shoe cubby, but he sees it too late, having already agreed to date Yuida. Upset, Naho goes home and drinks the orange juice. 10 years later, Naho and her friends read a letter from Kakeru's time capsule, noticing he wrote to everyone except his future self. 10 years later, Naho and her friends go to visit Kakeru's grandma, who he used to live with after his mom's sad passing. Back then, during a school break, Naho and her friends hang out at the mall. Kakeru and Yida start dating after the break, making it hard for Naho to talk to Kakeru. Following the letter's advice, Naho has to start talking to Kakeru again, even though Yida is always around. 4 days later, Naho tries to talk to a sad Kakeru, but she falls when Yida accidentally bumps into her. Kakeru rushes to help Naho and Yida leaves upset. Feeling guilty, Naho runs away, but Suwa stops her and tells her to talk to Kakeru. Naho hurries to talk to Kakeru, and her friends wonder what she might be keeping from them. At an outdoor bench, Kakeru tells Naho that he'll break up with Yida because he might be in love with someone else. On a rainy morning, Kakeru comes to school all wet because he forgot his umbrella. Naho gives him a bath towel instead of a handkerchief like her letter suggests. After school, when the sky clears, Kakeru takes Naho to a park. He gives her a hairpin as a thank you for the packed lunches and invites her to study chemistry at the library over the weekend. After Kakeru does well on the chemistry test, the teacher talks about time travel and many worlds interpretation. Naho notices her letter hasn't changed despite her decisions. Taking charge, Naho invites Kakeru to watch fireworks at the cultural festival's end. Until recently, Naho didn't realize Suwa might like her, something Kakeru, Takako, Hajida, and Azusa already knew. During the festival, Yida bothers Naho to give her the hairpin. Suwa steps in and saves Naho, and Kakeru later wraps her injured hand. Naho's letter mentions Suwa as the special person who saved her heart. Kakeru invites Naho to the pool to watch fireworks together. On the way, Yida makes Naho carry heavy packets. Suwa and Hajida trick Yida into thinking Kakeru is in the soccer club room. As the fireworks start, Takako and Azusa handle the packets, and Naho hurries to the pool. Naho and Kakeru hold hands while happily watching the fireworks. Naho's letter says Kakeru didn't die in an accident but took his own life. 10 years later, Kakeru's grandma shows them a letter where Kakeru wanted everyone to believe his death was an accident. Back then, Naho and Kakeru meet at the Bon Festival, with Suwa, Takako, Hajida, and Azusa pretending to be late. After a shrine visit, Kakeru tells Naho about his mom's suicide on his first school day. At her house, Naho gets upset when Kakeru stops contacting her. Suwa visits Naho asking about her letter. Naho finds out that Suwa also got a letter from his future self. The next day at school, they realize Kakeru's birthday is coming up and plan to celebrate together. 10 years later, they gather at Kakeru's memorial. Suwa gives Naho flowers and says Kakeru was always in love with her. Back then, Takako, Azusa, Hajida, Naho, and Suwa give gifts to Kakeru. He gives Naho Suwa's flowers and confesses his feelings. Shockingly, Naho and Suwa's letters say Kakeru might try to hurt himself 9 days after his birthday. Kakeru blames himself for his mom's death and admits having bad thoughts. Suwa comforts him and tells him to let go of guilt. Naho then confesses her feelings for him. Kakeru faints during soccer practice and Naho and friends take care of him in the infirmary before his grandma picks him up. Naho and Suwa talk about how their letters didn't say Kakeru would faint during soccer. The next day, Kakeru is picked for the relay race anchor leg. Naho and friends all volunteer for the race with Kakeru. In their rooms, Naho and Suwa talk on the phone, deciding to stop relying on their letters. Twice after school, Naho and Kakeru walk to the entrance, where Kakeru reaches out his hand. Naho gets confused as Kakeru apologizes and walks away. Later, Suwa, Takako, Hajida, and Azusa explain Kakeru just wanted to hold hands with Naho. Urged by Suwa, Naho tells her friends about the letter from herself in the future. Surprisingly, Takako, Azusa, and even Hajida got letters too. All 5 have the same goal, to save Kakeru. With her friends' renewed support to save Kakeru, Naho tries harder to improve her relationship with him. Azusa's letter predicts rain on her upcoming birthday despite a sunny morning. Naho, Suwa, Takako, Hajida, and Azusa all bring umbrellas, and Naho shares hers with Kakeru. While the others hang out at a diner, Naho and Kakeru find shelter at a park, where she finally holds hands with him. 9 days later, Naho relies on her letter again, finding out Kakeru doesn't like the athletic meet. Suwa's parents surprisingly bring Kakeru's grandma to the event. After the tug-of-war, Kakeru starts thinking about his mom. He mentions he might move, saying he's okay if Suwa dates Naho. After the pole toppling event, Suwa gets treated for cuts by Naho at the first aid station. A jealous Kakeru abruptly leaves without treatment, thinking about what he said to Suwa earlier. After the cheer battle, Hajida tells Suwa, Takako, and Azusa that Kakeru might have hurt his ankle in the pole toppling. Meanwhile, Naho and Kakeru run an errand carrying a heavy mat. Suwa, Takako, Hajida, and Azusa come to help them. Kakeru finally opens up about his mom's suicide, a heavy burden on him. Others believe his mom would want him to have fun. After Kakeru's ankle is bandaged, he's ready for the relay race. Suwa, Takako, Azusa, Hajida, and Naho pass the baton, ending with Kakeru as the anchor. The message is clear. They'll always be there for him. Kakeru, motivated, leads his team to victory, contrary to the letters. After the meet, Naho realizes her letter isn't always right or wrong. After treating Kakeru's scrape, he kisses her cheek as a reward for the relay win. 10 years later, Naho and friends talk about what could have been if Kakeru were still alive. Suwa regrets the most, knowing Naho and Kakeru's feelings. Back then, they plan a shrine visit for New Year's Eve later in the month. Naho and Kakeru go get taiyaki, and Takako confronts Suwa for skipping the shrine. Suwa doesn't want to tell Naho his feelings, thinking the future won't change. On New Year's Eve, Suwa stays home as others visit the shrine. Kakeru, getting drinks, asks Naho if he can check on his sick grandma. They fight as Kakeru fears his grandma becoming like his mom. Kakeru leaves after being scolded by Takako, Hajida, and Azusa. Suwa meets Naho to comfort her without confessing. At midnight, Kakeru smashes his phone when Naho tries to contact him. In the past, Kakeru and his mom moved from Tokyo to Matsumoto after his parents divorced. After his mom's suicide, Kakeru got really sad but didn't tell Naho and friends. Later, he plans to end his life by biking into a truck, finding an apologetic message from his mom about divorcing his violent dad. In the present, Naho and Kakeru drift apart at school, even when she tries apologizing for being insensitive on New Year's Eve. 10 years later, Naho and friends gather at a cherry blossom field. Hajida tells them about a black hole found by a Swiss researcher in the Bermuda Triangle. They decide to send letters to themselves 10 years ago. Back then, Naho tells Kakeru to wait until Valentine's Day. She's determined not to lose him no matter if he gets hurt or hates her. On Valentine's Day, Naho bakes chocolates for Kakeru but struggles to give them to him. After missing chances at school, her last one is ruined when Nida makes her drop the box. Determined, Naho meets Kakeru, confronting him for avoiding her. Despite his worries about hurting her, she apologizes and wants to date him to keep him happy. After they embrace, Kakeru asks for the chocolates, cheered on by Suwa, Takako, Hajida, and Azusa. The next day, Naho offers to walk with Kakeru, but he declines, having to take his grandma to the hospital. Naho's letter says Kakeru will die that evening. 10 years later, Hajida says their past can't change, but they can in a parallel world. Back then, Kakeru looks at his mom's phone. Naho and friends search for him as he almost walks into a truck. They find him, reveal the letters, and reconcile. Hajida vandalized Kakeru's bike. The next day, Kakeru adds his letter to the time capsule buried with the others.